Am I just not hearing anybody, or am I having audio issues?
I don't think anyone's talking. I can hear you just fine.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm here as well.
Okay.
There you go.
You can hear it. Okay.
Okay, Ryan, roll call.
Present.
David,
Present.
Dawn,
Present.
Kimberly,
Present.
Peck,
Present.
Will,
Present.
and then Lori having excused absence.
Great. Thank you very much. Do we have any public with us this evening that wants to make any comments? If you can't bring my glasses adjusted to read names, so I don't see any. We'll go ahead and go on to the consent agenda. Does everybody have a chance to review the minutes? For a motion to approve.
Meeting minutes.
All moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed. We'll move on to new business. There is, changes to the agenda. Did anybody have any changes to the agenda? No, okay. No new business. We're into old business, which is SDC and fee and lieu implementation plan. Before I throw it to Rochelle, I want to say a word or two. This is probably one of the more intricate issues that we'll deal with in the foreseeable future. It's definitely one that will have, or could have, very significant positive effects for us over the next number of years. Some would say it could have very significant negative effects for the community over the next number of years. It's complicated. It is emotional for some people. Some people will think that it will adversely affect their property or adversely affect their chances for purchasing property. Some people will think that it will make them wealthier because it will increase the values of their property. I'm not sure how much of either of those things is really true. I have my beliefs on it and my theories on it, which I don't want to bore you with, but I would encourage everybody to please ask lots of questions tonight. There are no bad questions when it comes to this topic. The better we understand it, the better we can make a recommendation. The better our recommendation will help the council make their decision. So with that, I'll pass it over to Rochelle.
Okay. Well, good evening, Parks Board. I just wanted to say welcome to Kimberly and Ryan. Thank you for being our two newest members on the board. So that's fantastic. So we're glad to have you. I'm going to just tee up the conversation real quick. With us, we have Zach Hazel and John Garaducci. Hope I said that correct, John. I've been practicing. So okay, good. Okay. So before we jump into the presentation, I just wanted to do a refresher real quick on SDC, being that we have two members. It is a complicated subject, and one that, in full transparency, I'm learning a ton about. So like Don said, if there's any questions or we get into the presentation, I've relied very heavily on Zach and John to answer some of my questions. So it's great that we have them here tonight so we can take advantage of the fact that they can give us their perspective. But first, an STC is a fee that is passed along to a developer. It's a one-time charge, and the fee helps pay for existing and planned infrastructure to serve that development. A fee in lieu is a separate fee unrelated to STCs where a developer can either dedicate parkland as they develop, or they can pay the fee in lieu of the dedication. So a fee in lieu is unique to Sandy, and it's codified in the Sandy Municipal Code, Chapter 1786, Parkland and Open Space. And that's the code that we've been working through as a Parks Board revamping this recently, which actually was approved and amended. So that's been updated. So the question is, why are we looking at SDCs and fee in lieu now? And why is this so important? So recently we just, as department, completed our master plan. And the master plan is the guiding framework for managing our continued growth and maintenance for our city's parks and recreation resources. So the master plan anticipates growth and establishes a future level of service. And that's the information that we had FCS use when they did their SDC and fee in lieu analysis. So FCS is our consultant that we hired, that we started working with in September of 2021. And they've been updating the methodology. That methodology is currently posted and available for people to look at. There are some extra copies on the table, so if you want to follow along, please do. But we have a public hearing scheduled for September 6th. And I'll talk about the timeline here towards the end, but that's required when you're updating your SDC methodology. So the other reason that we're looking at raising SDCs and our fee and load is we actually haven't, as a department, raised or increased our SDCs since 2016. So like Donna mentioned, this is a really good time and a conversation to talk about raising those fees to support the growing Sandy community and infrastructure that's coming in. So tonight, FCS is going to present 4 options. And the methodology findings, like they talked about, if we can kind of go back to our memories of the May meeting where they talked about the information they presented was the maximum threshold of both the SDC and the PLO that they discovered using the level of service in our master plan. So they're going to present pre-implementation options that will phase it SDCs in over a 5, 10, and 15-year period of time to the allowable maximum threshold. The 4th option includes raising SDCs to the average comparable based on other cities' SDCs, and then increasing the fee in lieu to a maximum threshold immediately. And again, FCS will go through those slides with you here in just a second. So yeah, I guess afterwards, if there's questions, we can talk about those and FCS can help us answer them. And then the board will have an opportunity to discuss. Ideally, provide a recommendation to the council that will go to an August 1st work session where the council will weigh and take your consideration into account when they discuss implementing this SDC fee in lieu. And then ideally or optimistically, I would hope that they would vote that in September 6th along with the methodology, and then away we go building parks and trails and just. Okay, so that's my tee up. John, Zach, if you guys are ready, we can make you host if you want to share your screen.
Yes,
And-
please. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's all you.
As Zach is getting the PowerPoint up, I'm as Rochelle said, and thank you, Rochelle. I'm John Gillarducci. I'll go through the first couple of slides here, and then Zach, who has done the heavy lifting, analytical lifting throughout the process and developed the phasing options, he'll walk us through what those options are. So we will pick up sort of where we left off and skip a lot of the system development charge background and detail on the calculation. I'll do a quick refresher on the math that will just kind of remind everyone where the numbers came from. And then we'll get right into the phasing topic. And then, as I mentioned, Zach will take us through the actual options that we've put together. So you could go to the next screen, please, Zach. This is a summary of the results of our study, the city's study that we executed. The system development charge column shows the calculated maximum fee per resident. That's the basis of the park system development charge. It is applied by dwelling unit and by dwelling unit type based on the average occupancy. So you see single family, multifamily, and mobile home dwelling units there, and the resulting system development charges. Your eyes are not deceiving you. These are really high numbers compared to what we see around the state. The city's existing SDC is a little over $3,700 for a single family dwelling unit right now. The fee in lieu, which is calculated based on the unit cost of land in Sandy, and that's one of the reasons it's gone up so much too, is because land costs have gone up so much. You see the resulting fees in lieu there, first per resident and then per dwelling unit by the dwelling unit type. So a new single family dwelling unit in the city of Sandy or any dwelling unit type would pay the two together, assuming they chose to pay the fee in lieu rather than dedicate land to the totals you see in that right-hand column. So this gives you an idea of how that result, just the system development charge part, would fit in around the region. We've seen a couple calculated sort of in this range, but they haven't been adopted at the full fee. So you see at that maximum defensible charge, the city's charge would be about double Lake Oswego, and then you see a number of others there, Tigard, Sherwood, Happy Valley. We are seeing these go up whenever we do an update, in large part because the cost of land acquisition have gone up so much, and regular cost escalation.
Yeah, I believe, yeah,
John,
absolutely.
can I interrupt just for a second?
Sure.
This is Will. Hey, I heard Rochelle say that the fee in lieu was unique to Sandy. And yet this, and obviously this slide caught my eye in comparison to other communities. So do any of these other communities have a fee in lieu? Because we're just looking at FTCs, right?
Yes, we did recalculate the fee in lieu for Sandy and updated that charge so that what we showed you on the previous page is an updated defensible fee in lieu. I couldn't tell you. I don't think any of these have an additional fee in lieu. We just did a park SDC and fee in lieu update for the city of Veneta. They are another city that has both a park SDC and a fee in lieu. So they're not unique to Sandy, but Sandy is by no means the only city that has both an SDC and a fee in lieu. I know Milwaukee also has a fee in lieu, but it's not for parks. It's for either stormwater or transportation. So they are out there.
Where the question comes from is, and obviously again, this slide caught my eyes. Are we looking at apples and apples here?
This comparison slide is only system development charges. It does not include the fee in lieu. So we've tried to make it apples to apples and compare these, the SDC, the defensible maximum for Sandy, with only the park SDC in these other cities.
And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but the fee in lieu was calculated based on the data that you pulled for Sandy for the assessed value, right? For property?
For land only.
Land only.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Okay.
So
Yes, based on Sandy's current land costs.
Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Sure. So this is an example of a very long-term phasing approach. For some work we did in Hermiston, they had very, very low system development charges, and the calculated new SDCs were still pretty low, but they chose to phase them in over a long period of time in order to give the development community plenty of time to plan and respond. Not suggesting that that's what the city of Sandy do, but it was just one approach and an example of an option, and it's probably most closely aligned with the 15-year phasing example that Zach will show you in a minute. And so as Rochelle mentioned, we developed 4 different options. One phases to the full SDC in 5 years, 10 and 15 years. And then the last one sets the SDC to that average of comparable communities and implements the full fee in lieu. The other 3 also phase in the fee in lieu. So those are the options. There are an infinite number of other options you could choose if you choose to phase in at all. These are just to give you some examples about how these might be implemented over time. And with that, Zach will take us through these phasing options.
Okay, thank you, John. So we're going to start here with the 5-year phase in. And you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, we're starting in 2023. The starting SDC in this case would be $6,267. It would increase by that amount all the way until 2027, where you get up to the full SDC. And on the right, the fee in lieu starts at $3,227. It gets up to $16,000. Now, just a quick note too, what I'm showing you here is purely phasing to the maximum SDC and fee in lieu. However, you can also simultaneously index this to inflation. So that's not shown here because that's going to be a process as you continue charging the SDC, but that is something you can do as well. Kind of separate processes there. So here's kind of that same information presented graphically, and we get some extra information here about delayed projects. So everything you see in green here is what you're collecting in SDC and fee in lieu revenue. And anything you see in red here is what you are missing out on by not charging the full SDC and fee in lieu. And by totaling up what you've missed out on over these 4 columns here in red, you actually miss out on 8.8 million in projects. That's for the SDC. You lose $8.8 million in SDC revenue, which results in delayed projects, and 4.5 million in delayed acquisitions. In terms of projects, that 8.8 million is 50% of your tier 1 projects, which are the projects you're targeting to complete over 5 years. So if you found no other funding source for those projects, about 50% of them would need to be delayed under a 5-year phase-in. Okay, next up here is a 10-year phase-in, starting at $3,133 for the SDC and $3,109. If we increase by just over $3,000 per year for the SDC and just shy of $1,500 for the fee in lieu, that gets us up to the maximum charge for both after 10 years. And now in this case, you'll be losing out on $20.8 million in SDC revenue and $9.6 million in fee in lieu revenue. And that adds up to be about 62% of your tier 1 and tier 2 projects together. All right, next up here is a 15-year phase-in. So starting at $3,717 and $3,109, if you increase by just shy of $2,000 and just shy of $1,000 for the fee in lieu, that gets you to the full SDC after 15 years and fee in lieu. Now that works out to be $31.7 million in delayed projects, and this is just over 2035, just so you see, so we're missing 2 years there. That works out to be 51%, excuse me, 51% of all of your SDC projects. And that's $15 million in delayed acquisitions from the lost fee in lieu revenue as well. Okay, so the last option here is a lot more simple, no phasing in required. In this option, you would just set your SDC to the average of those comparable jurisdictions we saw. The average there is $7,221. So you would set that immediately, and then you would start, it's not shown on this slide, but then you could start inflating it with inflation. That works out to be $50.9 million in lost SDC revenue over this time span. And just to keep things simple here, we don't really have enough comparable jurisdictions to set an average fee in lieu. So this is just showing you what the full implementation of the fee in lieu immediately would look like. But of course, you know, like John said, you could do whatever you wanted. You could also implement 50% of the fee in lieu if you prefer. You just can't implement more than the maximum. All right. So lastly, Rochelle asked me to show you an example of what SDCs might look like with inflation. And I've done that for all 4 schedules here. This is just an example because when it actually came time to adjust your SDC for inflation, you would want to do that based on actual data. You don't want to set your SDC ahead of time based on expected inflation. This is more for information, but you can see that if you were to set your SDC with inflation, you'd actually get up to $48,000 if you phase into the maximum by the end of the planning period here in 2037. And as for the average SDC, if you inflated that with cost inflation, that'd get up to $11,000. And by the way, that's just assuming a 3% average inflation rate per year. Once it came time to actually do this, you would set it based on actual change in a construction cost index. And those are all the slides we have. So I guess now it's time to answer any questions.
Everybody understands that well enough.
I've got a question.
Okay.
Don, you said in the beginning that you thought that some people would think that it increases, some people would think that it decreases. What was your train of thought on that? How does this affect, or how does this positively or negatively affect current property values?
Well, at the time that a developer comes in and they have a choice, they either pay it when they're platting or they can pay it when they're pulling their permits. If they pay it when they're platting, they get a slight discount, is my understanding. They wait till they pull their permits. The bottom line is the same, however. If a developer is coming in and they're paying $31,000 for systems development for parks, on top of all their other fees, the planning permits, the SDCs for transportation, water, and sewer, those add up. That will ultimately be passed along to whoever is buying that property, whoever buys that finished product. Once people start buying that product with the elevated upfront costs, eventually that starts pushing up the average values or the average cost of homes within Sandy. If you follow the logic of a high tide raises all boats, eventually that works down into homes that are on the secondary market. So if you could buy a house in Sandy for $300,000 before all the SDC raises, that house now becomes $330,000 just based on our increase alone.
Okay.
So eventually it will start pulling other property values up, which for me as a homeowner, I think, oh, this is great. I have more equity in my home instantly. However,
So now, when we say developers, are we talking like large structural developers, your average family home developers?
yes and yes. And one more category, which would be the guy that buys a single lot to build his home for his family. So it could be the Lennars, a national company, just did 100 homes. They're in the process of doing 100 homes by 211 there. It
Yeah.
could be Jim Ray's that does 10 homes a year. Or it could be you that sees a vacant lot that you like, buy it, get a construction loan and build it yourself. You're all paying that same SDC per unit. Now, if it's you as an individual, maybe you have that extra 30K in your pocket to pay. Maybe you don't. If you don't, then you're having to take out a bigger construction loan to pay that cost. If you're a Lennar, then you probably have that extra money to pay. And so it creates a potential for inequity amongst the size of the builders also. That's
Okay.
kind of a simplified
And
explanation of the negative side. John, did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, I could even add, one of the things you'll hear from the development community is that SDCs at this level could slow or stop development in the city. I could say we haven't actually seen that, but this is as I mentioned, this is a pretty high result. That could have an effect on the local economy. On the other hand, system development charges fund infrastructure, and parks and other infrastructure improvements increase the quality of life and the value of a city on the other side. So there are a couple of other less direct impacts of system development charges.
Right, David, I cut you off, but go ahead, an extra follow-up question.
So yeah, so because I am the small town guy, and I still believe Sandy has a chance of remaining small, but I mean it's slipping away quickly on us. Is there no way to do like a sliding fee scale on those SDCs based on the size of your development? So like you got me, Joe Blow, who is planning on building your average 2,100 square foot family home. There's no way to do a sliding scale based on the size of the development. So you got Lennar, who's building 100 homes. Obviously, he's going to max out at the highest level possible. You got Joe here building, a single family home just for his family. that he bought 1 acre of land on and is trying to make a better life for themselves.
I've never heard of that before, but I have limited experience, obviously. John, can you respond to that?
Yeah, one of the things that we are required to do is use rate making principles in developing a system development charge. So yes, we can scale the charges, but we can only do it in a way that is based on their likely use of parks or impact on the park system. So you could scale based on the size of the home and correlate the average number of occupants with the size of the home. But I don't think you could do it based on who's paying it or the size of the development, because each individual dwelling unit in that development will use the parks just like another dwelling unit. You wouldn't be able to distinguish among the size of the development. I hope that makes sense, but you might be able to scale it by the size of the house.
It does, yeah. But so when you say development, you're talking like Lennar, where they developed an entire neighborhood, in a year and a half. When I mean development, I mean just a single guy coming in on a piece of land who's been acquisitioned by the city or for whatever reason is in the process of being brought into city limits, who has just built a single family home, who the use on the parks is going to be minimal. Myself, I am a firm believer that we have enough parks in the city, and we need to maintain and rebuild what we have and make better than what we have. I've got one awesome park in my neighborhood right now, or a kitty corner to my neighborhood, which doesn't even have a swing set in it. I don't know how that got skipped when the park was being built. I fully believe, like Don says, Lennar has the money in their pocket, so hit them where it hurts. But Joe, who's trying to make a house for himself out here and build himself a single family home in a loosely connected area, does not have an extra $30,000 that he can just go and throw around and give to the city for the development charges.
And unfortunately, that's a distinction that we can't make in the SDC schedule, is the ability to pay, or if we could say that new home that you're describing, the single family residence all off on its own, is going to have fewer occupants than the occupants in this larger development on a per dwelling unit basis, then there might be an opportunity to scale it that way, because it is the number of occupants that is the best nexus or link to park usage.
I think the other problem with that scenario, David, is in the event the homeowner, the single guy that's just buying a house for his family or building a house for his family, it's done with the house, day to move in, wife walks in and says, "Yeah, I hate it, let's sell it." All of a sudden he can sell it at a higher rate than what he had paid his SDC for. So it becomes a little problematic on that end of it too.
So I guess that's where the creative area comes in at, because that there's restrictions put on businesses all the time, or even on cities, where if a business wants to bring in like Amazon, for instance, God forbid, hopefully they never come out here, but Amazon comes out here, the city of Sandy says, okay, for bringing all this work and all this people out here, we're going to give you tax free for the next 10 years. We do something like that with a single family home on, in a true single family home, one development, one land, that you can't sell it for, you have to remain in it for 5 years. I know when you get a home loan, especially conventional, you have to basically agree that that's going to be your primary residence for 1 year before you can sell it. So why can't the city say, okay, if we're gonna waive this or reduce this SDC for Joe, why can't we put a restriction on how long he has before he can sell it?
Don't know that that's legal. I don't know that it's not legal. I think Peg had a question here too.
I was under the impression that the STC laws.
Well, SDC laws are enabled by the state, right? But they're local ordinance also.
Okay. So we do have some, but there's a lot.
There's some control, and then there's a lot of case law that's been settled that really impacts, how it goes too. And I believe that Will had a question.
Well, so, I mean, if my understanding is correct, I'll let one of the experts or the many experts here correct me. We're talking about single family homes, whether it's 100 single family homes or one single family home, we're talking about single family homes. And the impact that has on the park that sets the fee. So I've got 2.3 people per home that sets the fee for each home. At the end of the day, there's 100 mortgage holders that are buying these single family homes. I don't care if it was one builder or 100 builders that built them. It's the same single family home, the same mortgage. And don't think for a second that the developer is not passing every cent of this cost through to the consumer. So I'm just having difficulty seeing the difference between, this nice story of this guy building his home on a lot that he found and the person that's buying a home from a company and has the same mortgage or the same lender at the same rate. I can't differentiate.
It's easy to differentiate it because you have someone like Lennar who's coming in and building 100 homes in an area where can it handle it? Should it handle it? No. Our infrastructure, our roads are still not improved enough to handle the amount of homes that are coming into this town, but yet that's not stopping the developers from bringing them in. So I'm a firm believer, if we build a home here and a home there, then we're better off in the town that we are and that we should be than we are if we allow these multi-residential developers to come in here and throw in 5,000 people into an area that can barely support what we have already.
I think the point is that those developers are not gonna end up, they're gonna get their money back in a way.
Yeah,
I mean, they're gonna pass on that fee, no matter if we pay for a single family home on our own versus we go into a developer, the developers go like, hey, here's the extra fee, without telling you there's a fee.
And David, I agree with that, but I mean, that's the building permit process, not the SDC charges that we're talking about.
Right.
The other interesting point to your statement is we don't have the infrastructure now to support that. The idea of the SDCs is to build the infrastructure to support that. So by not increasing our SDCs, we are in effect taking steps back from providing that infrastructure, which puts us further behind the 8 ball. And then you can say that about parks, you can say that about the streets, they have SDCs, say that about water, they have SDCs as the sewer. So it's all kind of a big package there.
Okay.
It is without a doubt a thorny issue to deal with.
I fully believe that we're bringing the wrong type of crowd.
I don't necessarily disagree with you on that. However, I don't know that SDCs are the way to regulate the type of crowd that we're bringing in. And I think that people may have a difference of opinion with me or you on what the right crowd is or isn't. And I just lost my track of thought, so does anybody else?
Whether we do or not, it's a different process than the STC.
Yes, it is.
Limit how many.
Right, that's a moratorium process, which can be done. It's just a fully different thing than SDCs.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question about the implementation. When it comes to like our infrastructure, not having enough right now to support the growing population, is it wiser to implement it at a longer, like at a longer level, say 15 years, to allow people to adjust to that so that there's more of a draw to come to Sandy? You know, people are going to want to move here if the streets are nicer and things like that. Or does it make more sense to have the cost up front so that we could get those things started? I guess it's just two different methodologies, and I'm wondering which one would work best.
If we're going to go for it all, then I would say the cost needs to be up front. The only thing that the inflation is stopping is people like us from going out and buying cars or buying houses and stuff like that. The inflation and everything that's going on right now around the country is not stopping these large developers. They're pushing forward at full steam freight train speed. You know, in my industry where I currently my bread and butter, my work, you know, I do a lot of work for these guys, and I see what they're building every single day, and they're not slowing down. So I mean, it's not this isn't going to hurt anybody but the average guy.
I didn't mean inflation, sorry, I meant implementation. Like if we start the SDC at a higher rate now versus starting it at a lower rate and implementing it slower, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
and I think
reverse.
that's why we kind of had our consultant show us that phase in project and give us an idea of what we'd be missing out on, or how long it would take to catch up on those things. And it clearly, I think it does two things. One is that it slows down our revenue and doesn't allow us to do the projects, as many projects as quickly, but it does allow people to for lack of better words, maybe complain longer about the cost continually escalating as opposed to just tearing the Band-Aid off and doing it.
If I may, it is a popular approach. Phasing it in, not usually as long as 10 or 15 years, but when there's a concern over the chill it might send over development, so that allows the development community to plan better and respond. You know, the trade-off is revenue, is exactly as you were describing, and with less revenue, the city can build less, so there's less infrastructure up front. It does one of the other ways that it's been used, though, like in Hermiston, that sort of long-term phasing schedule, is it does allow the city to keep an eye on things and gauge the impact on the market over time. And, you know, there's no way to hold a future council to these phasing plans. If 5 years from now, the city's 5 years into the 15-year phasing and there's no development in the city and there's concerns about the chilling effect, they could stop phasing it. And, you know, there's kind of a built-in off ramps there if the city chooses to use them, that it's a little more severe, a little more of a steep slope early. You don't necessarily have that time to watch. So that's one other reason I think those can be useful. But if that's less of a concern, then it may not be worth the trade-off for the revenue, and that's a pure policy choice by the city.
So Mike, just to that, I think that's a great question. He said on passing on the implementation, what are the pluses and minuses? From where I'm sitting, we're making a recommendation, a suggestion. We're not making a decision. So what we need to come up with is something that will pass our council, right, and be turned into law, or whatever the proper term is. And to do that, it's got to face, hopefully, sort of, you know, there's plus or minuses to this. So it needs to be something that's palatable enough to pass. and in my mind, I mean, and I don't want to say which plan, but some kind of phased implementation of the SDCs made sense. But if I'm correct in assuming the fee in lieu of was based on inflation of land, actual real estate values, is that correct?
Yes.
So to me, that was an immediate change.
Yeah.
And I mean, to me, that if it's an immediate change, then my fee in lieu of would be an immediate change. And the SDCs phase over some kind of time. But that's just one person's opinion.
I totally agree with you on that. When I look at the fee in lieu, we've been put into a position several times now over the past couple of years. And one of them was with the Lennar project of not being able to control whether we're collecting a fee in lieu or whether we're accepting land. And there's been disputes over the past few years with developers that will say, well, I don't want to give up any more land. We're going to pay the fee in lieu. And we have always held the position historically that, no, that's our decision. And what we learned prior to this process beginning was that we didn't have the right language within our master plan. We didn't have the legal fortitude to be able to do that. And as a result, that was one of the things that drove some of our decisions in the master plan and then the new implementation of the language, or the new language implementing fees in lieu, was to give us that control. When a developer comes in and they say, oh, I got to give up 2 acres of land, and it can't be wetland, it can't be severe slope, and it can't be protected forest, it has to be usable land that we could conceivably build a ball field on, or put a swing set on, or whatever it is we want to do with that. When they take a look at the price, you know, what they're giving up for numbers of houses to give that land versus what we would charge them as a fee in lieu in the past, it's a no-brainer. They want to pay the money, get done with it, and build as many houses as they can out there. And so I, like Will, I agree with Will that I think we should go for the maximum on our fee in lieu, the highest we can get on our fee in lieu, and do that one immediately. The SDCs, I think, are important, but right now I think the fee in lieu is probably more important to us.
Isn't there some language around the fee in lieu now that if it's less than 4 acres, they have that choice, but if it's more, then it's supposed to be dedicated land? I thought I read that in maybe
I think that, yeah, we can double check that, but I think it is still our choice, or supposed to be our choice. There's been several times where we've, and just this last meeting, we reaffirmed a previous decision that we wanted to maintain receiving the fee in lieu as opposed to, yeah, like an eighth of an acre,
Yeah.
whatever it was. Right, so it isn't very much, but it's still, you know, when you get the fee in lieu, it still will add up significantly.
So the other recommend, or one of the options was to use the average. Are we, since so far we've been talking about phasing in or not phasing in, but have we talked about whether we want to go to the maximum or choosing average, or we had that discussion?
We should not have that discussion. You know, and as much as we want this to be a math answer, the reality is it's going to be a political answer. What it's going to come down to.
And the max is double, but I read that correctly, the max is double the highest municipality is currently charging.
That makes it really hard.
And of course, those are all going to go up, you know, at various times. There was no magic to the average. You could pick any number, essentially, as Zach said, up to that maximum. You could pick 10,000 and set it there at that discounted rate. But again, the trade-off would be in less revenue.
But I can assure you, if we picked 31,000, we got 31,000, like Oswego would be saying, gee,
Sandy,
I guess we're no Sandy. We're not as good as Sandy. We don't deserve that 31,000.
They'll be saying thank you. Yeah.
Yes, they will be.
is there a potential for starting the phasing in at a higher rate and then phasing in to a level that maybe does or doesn't go up to the maximum, but not starting at the lowest rate possible for the phase in?
I think that answer is yes, but we'll let
Yes.
John answer that one.
Absolutely. There's really any pattern you could use. You want to start it out higher and increase it less steeply, you could do that, or, you know, and only up to a certain amount. We couldn't even begin to pick every permutation, but we can model it. You know, if you have something you'd like to see, we can show you that. Yeah.
I think one other thing that would be good for clarity is to define what immediate means in the process of, you know, pulling plats or pulling permits or permits pulled, or, you know, what does immediate mean? just when we're defining it, we're saying this is what our recommendation for us.
By immediate, do you mean the effective date of the
Yeah, I mean, like.
of the new charge?
I'm a developer and I've set my costs and set my project plan and set my margins. At what point in the, and I need to adjust for that. I need to know when I need to adjust. That's just fair play.
Yeah, so I believe these are due at the time of building permit. So yeah, there could be development in the pipeline that you would want to be sensitive to that, I think, if there were a significant increase, to give them a little bit of time to adjust their plans. That once the 90-day notice period has passed, the council can choose an effective date, essentially at any time after that. But that could be part of the recommendation to make it effective in the spring or the first of the year or whatever.
Rochelle, you had mentioned that the hopeful decision date is the September council meeting, the first one in September, the second one. September is the first one. Would that imply that we can continue this discussion or have more discussion about this at our next meeting or August meeting?
Yeah, we'll be bringing up one of the recommendations or some of the recommendations to the August 1st work session, council work session for discussion.
So you need information tonight.
Ideally, it'd be great. I could check to see if we could bump that August 1st date back to the 15th. I'm not sure what's on the, it's a heavily loaded council work session here. So I can check on that. But it's up to you.
Okay. Well, let's keep talking and see if we can circle in on something here. Going back to the fee in lieu, you heard my opinion, you heard Will's opinion. Does anybody else have an opinion about that?
I think that makes sense. Cool. I agree.
David, Kimberly, Ryan, any thoughts on that piece?
I actually I agree with you, Don, with increasing the fee in lieu initially to make sure that, it's making it more of a challenging decision for the developers to just pay the funds right off the bat and make it more of a challenge for them, and so that they can consider something different. So I agree with you, Don, on that one.
Kimberly,
I'm in agreement with that also.
David?
I'm in agreement.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we all have a general agreement on that. Let's go back and talk about the SDCs now. Does anybody have a strong feeling about us starting? Well, first of all, how do people feel about the concept of phasing in as opposed to jumping in?
I think we need to start on the higher level. I don't think we need to start at the middle, but I don't think we need, that's the lowest, but I don't think we need to start on the highest either. Because like I said in one of my previous, is our roads need a lot of help. Our light system needs a lot of help. And with these developers coming in, it's going to take us a while to get there.
Yes. What's everybody else feel about that?
I think that it makes more sense to do a phase in as opposed to just a set level that's lower, because it seems like the 5-year and the 15-year had the best ability to cover the needs of the department, versus like the 10-year, it looked like there was, I can't remember the numbers, but there was a significantly higher percentage of things that would be not covered. And then also the same with setting it at an average rate right off the bat and not increasing it except for inflation.
If I could just jump in there really quickly. You saw some percentages on the phase-ins. There, it's a little bit deceiving. For example, the first phase in, you missed out on 50% of the tier 1 projects. This 10-year phase in, that's 62% of tier 1 and 2. And then the 15-year phase in is 50% of all projects. So it's not necessarily that your one is worse than the other in terms of lost revenue. You gotta, they're talking about different time spans there. So just a caution, I guess.
Okay, I'm with you now. Thank you.
The longer you wait, the longer you get, the more money anyway,
Right.
so.
My personal feeling is I like the phase in. Personally, I feel I would like to see a 5-year phase in. I would like to see it start somewhere around the average. The question I have is, how high do you go? Do we recommend that we do a 5-year phase in? Starting higher and getting all the way to the 31,000 mark? I will tell you, I do not believe that will be a successful recommendation. I don't, personally, I don't think it will pass. But I don't know what will. I don't have a clue as to what the top end should be.
I have a question really quick. I believe in the May meeting, they discussed like the maximum. I wrote down the number of 22,436, the full justified SDC for Sandy. Was that before they made the updates that they brought to us tonight? And that's where they came up with the 30, or is that the 31,333? Or is that like, I was kind of curious, because the last meeting was 22,436 and this one was 31,330. So what was the difference between the two of them? Was it just updated information?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
I can speak to that.
Exactly.
Okay.
The first time we showed you this, we didn't have a reimbursement fee. We weren't quite there with the data. Since that time, we've gotten enough data to calculate reimbursement fee. So all of that extra is the reimbursement fee.
So basically the reimbursement fee is 1/3 of our SDC.
Right.
Right?
Right.
In
About.
round numbers, please.
Yeah. Yeah, about.
Just for my notification, somebody.
Okay, 2 different kinds. One is development based on growth, and reimbursement is buying into existing facility.
Exactly.
So Don, am I understanding this correctly? 31,000 would be the maximum, the number they paid for, say, permits and development.
No, that is only the maximum that they would pay. The parts would be 31,000. If we were at our maximum, it would be 31,000 plus the 19 on the fee and lieu, or 16 on the fee and lieu.
Yeah.
16 on the fee and lieu. That would go to parks. They would also pay SDCs for sewer, water, and transportation, and then they would pay building permit fees also on top of that. So by the time they walk out, they will have a rather significant investment in the city of Sandy.
I can't imagine they passed a higher rate than what Lake Oswego has, given that the homeowner in Lake Oswego's average budget income is probably significantly higher than Sandy's.
I would guess their average income is probably a little bit above ours. I'm sure there are plenty of people in Lake Oswego that are not above ours, but I'm sure that the average is considerably above ours. I agree, though. Everybody wants to have the most or the best, but nobody wants to go first. Nobody, it's not a comfortable place to be the head of the pack all the time.
Yeah, I kind of have a question regarding that too. Thinking about 31 being so high, is there a way to look at those other cities? It's like their projection rate. Do we know if they're doing any of this work? We say 31's too high right now. We settle on something like 15, and in 2 years, everyone's at 45 to 28. And in 2 years, we're back at being at the bottom of the barrel again because we didn't go for it.
So
Is there
I can't recall off the top of my head which ones on the list might be undergoing updates right now that we would know of. We've done a lot of them, so we would know many of them. I know, I can't remember if Happy Valley was on the list. They are about to do an update. Interestingly, their calculated maximum was about 20,000 a few years ago, and they adopted a discounted rate because of their concerns about going to the full amount. They've since escalated it with inflation every year, and they're looking at updating that charge with an updated parks plan in the next year. So that's one I know. I think we could expect that they'll go up a minimum of inflation every year without an update. But I can't tell you with certainty who else is. Oh, North Clackamas Park and Rec District, they're undergoing an update right now, and their fees will likely go up. We're doing that work. I can't remember if they were on the comparables list or not.
And didn't Albany just go through?
Yes. Yes, they have not. I don't think they've adopted. They may have, but they were not substantial increases. They were not like the numbers we looked at.
I'm pretty sure that
They
we
did.
could make some pretty safe bets that if we jump to 31, there will be a lot of cities going through the process right behind. It would be great for your business, John.
I don't know.
You talk about it, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
I like 5 years. Makes it more palatable. Two is if suddenly everybody does go to $50,000 a year, 5 years from now, we can change our SDC schedule again or go at it in another, take a whole new iteration. So if anything past that, we're starting to lose revenue for projects that we could be taking advantage of now. But I honestly don't think it's going to pass it. Just say, here, do this at X amount. I like the thought of starting it at a higher rate and then coming up to whatever the target is based on inflation, and then with an immediate, that's where I'm
So-
at.
If we do the 5 years, what does that take it up to?
Well, it takes it up to as high as we want it to go, as long as it doesn't go over 31,333. As high as this council is willing to let it go, as long as it doesn't go over the 31,333.
Zach, would you be willing to share your screen again and share the SDCs with inflation chart that you created? And it breaks it down just over the years with inflation, but it also shows the different examples. So it might.
The bar graphs.
No, there's a chart.
So I don't know if this is helpful or if there's another one, but this one shows like if you set the average SDC to the average now based on this shows if you do inflation. So kind of if you could take this and use this essentially if you started higher and did inflation over 5 years or whatever your threshold, it kind of gives an idea of what it would be incrementally.
Right.
It's a visual. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
So just explain that first line to me, Rochelle. So 2023, our 5-year phase in, it would start at 64.53.
yep, and then that would be in, well, Zach, actually, do you want to answer that?
Is that
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, that's right. So presumably, if you're implementing this in 2023, then maybe that's January with a little bit of inflation versus what you saw previously. then you would start at 6,453.
One of the, and I don't want to muddy things with ideas, but if you look at that far right column, I think that's one of the things that you've been suggesting is starting it at so you could start it at the 7435 and then begin, what could be a 10-year phase in and recommend that the council revisit it in 5 years or something like that. Or you could target what is essentially half of the calculated maximum, which conveniently is Lake Oswego's current charge, and phase it to 5 years, phase over 5 years to that half of the calculated maximum with inflation. So you would end up at 17,000 or 18,000 or something like that after 5 years. Again, there's a million ideas, and I don't mean to inject any policy, but
I like your starting point, John. I like the thought of setting the average as a starting point.
Agree with that as well.
What was that?
I agree with that as well. I kind of like the idea of that.
Is that David talking?
Correct.
Oh, Ryan
That's
talking,
right.
okay. Okay. All right, I have a hard time differentiating voices sometimes.
All good.
David, what do you think?
So, so the average is 74.35, and then it goes to 76.56, and so on, right?
That's based on 3% inflation, yes.
Why is the 5-year plan so drastically increased?
Oh, so
Because
this
that
is
phases to
sorry.
the maximum. Sorry, Zach.
Yeah, that's right.
They're really different. The one on the far right by itself doesn't even attempt to get to the maximum amount. So what we're contemplating, I think, is a hybrid, which would start at that 74.35, and then you can choose how to scale it from there. It could be and to what number it is scaled. If it's
Okay.
it could be 5-year plan to 20,000 from that 74.35, 5 years to 18, 5 years to 15. Yeah.
And this is a separate charge than fee and lieu.
Yes,
This is, yeah. Sorry.
we're still requesting,
I like the average.
you like starting at the average? David,
I like starting at the average.
starting at the average. And then what do you do in year 2? Inflation or inflation plus another number or another number?
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
So
I mean,
oops, sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
Well, you could do both. You could phase in and apply inflation.
That's target
Right.
for 5 years. Based on inflation and what your target is.
My personal feeling is I like starting at the average 74.35. I like a 5-year phase in. I like including inflation in that 5-year phase in. What I don't know is I don't know what that top number should be. And I don't think 31,000 is going to be palatable for the council. I would say that our best bet on a top number might be half of that, might be more like what Lake Oswego is.
What if we recommend 20 and then
So would it be,
oh, there you go.
Go ahead, David.
so I get what you're saying, like you don't like that number, but it'd be more beneficial to the Parks Committee to throw that number out there and have the council come back and counter it?
Yeah, that's basically what Peck just said. Is ask for a little bit more and hope we get a little bit more.
I mean, I've always been a ask for forgiveness, not permission type of guy. So
Ask for the moon.
Yeah. Right.
so I mean, for me that sounds more, let the council tell us what they're willing to, you know.
But I'm fine with that. I think starting off at the averages, I think we're selling ourselves short if we don't do that.
I agree.
If you did the 5-year phase-in plan, beyond that, would inflation continue to add to the cost? So you reach like what we designate as the maximum, but then year 6 comes along. Would year 6 account for inflation only, or does it completely stop at year 5?
Great question. I think you well, go ahead.
Yes, inflation would then, the charge would then be indexed to inflation. So every year it would be increased by that amount.
I have a question, John, regarding that.
Mhm.
So couldn't we technically, after 5 years, based on the methodology, if it's passed, reevaluate where we're at 5 years and then reset another 5 years to get to the 31,333?
Yes, you could.
Okay, so then we could take it, yeah, we could take it, do it to 5, reevaluate. And then, yeah.
Without having to go through another big
That's,
plan
yeah.
process.
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty logical thing. Pretty cool.
I do like the 5-year phase in, because I feel like if we're gonna increase.
Would someone be willing to just give a quick summary of what was just said? Like it kind of cut out a little bit. I really apologize. I was listening, but if someone could just do a quick summary.
We'll let Rochelle do that.
So they had talked about, and jump in if I don't get this quite right, a phased in over 5 years, starting at the $7,435. The max is still yet to be determined. I've heard conversations potentially half of what we have for a max. But then in 5 years from now, when we've reached that 5-year phase in, we can reevaluate as a parks board and take it back in front of the council for another 5-year phase in to get us to that 31,000. And especially if we see the rest of SDCs that are comparables skyrocket, then we can follow suit.
Yeah.
That sounds great. I really like that idea. The average 7,074.35 5-year. Make it half, which is about the 15,667, I think. Would be the tops, would be the maximum, I think, at half, I believe. And that includes the inflation. I like that. And then readjust it and like reevaluate it at the end of the 5 years up to and see if we can get it up to the 31,000 that was max in the next 5. I like that a lot. Nice idea, Rochelle.
So I mean, if I'm reading if I'm reading that right, if we do.
I think we'll have a question.
So the only adjustment I would make to that, just for fun, because this is a working session, right? August 1st, so you're gonna work with it. It would be rather than going at just saying half, because it's the same as Lake Oswego, and we'd be doing that at 20 grand over 5 years. Fee in lieu of immediate 20 grand over 5 years, adjust for inflation. It's about $2,700 a year. If you're just thinking of that chart in the column in the left, rather than going up where it is. That's the only other adjustment I would consider. Just throwing it out there.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you reassess it in 5 years, is there an additional cost associated with reassessing? Like, would we need to hire someone to consult again? Or, I mean, financially, does that make sense? Or is it, would we just use the consultation that we have now?
You would have a valid, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I was following you, John.
You would have a valid methodology, so you would not need to do an update. If conditions had changed dramatically, you might want to, but you would not be required to. So you could just pull that up and say, hey, this supports 31,000. So we're going to go up to 31,000.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing too is I think there's cities that publish comparables that you can pull off of websites, and we did some research, and so it's something we could do as staff.
John, is Lake Oswego, are they indexed to inflation?
Yes.
So in 5 years, it's reasonable to think that they'd already be at 20,000 also.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I think almost all of the cities or agencies you saw on that list are indexed.
Then I like what Will said. Anybody else have any feelings about it?
I also like going towards the 20,000 as the top end.
Yes. Are you okay with?
Yeah,
Kimberly?
I would agree with that. Is I think, you know, at very little over the next 5 years, we need to at least be at the Lake Oswego level. And make it, you know, we don't want to be lower than them, obviously, because they're about comparable size. I remember someone making a comment that their income's higher, and that's only because of the persona that they put themselves through years ago to make them more of the Richie Rich area. I mean, Sandy could have been that way too if we would have done that route. We just chose to go a different route. But I think over the next 5 years, I think we need to get as much out of the STCs as possible. And if that means getting up to the 31,000, then that means getting up to the 31,000. But we definitely don't want to be below everybody else. That's what's making Sandy such a desirable spot for these developers to come into, is because we are lower than everybody else.
Yes. I agree with that.
And that's why Don's fee and lieu idea of maxing it out right off the bat is like kind of like helps that out a little bit, I think. And also those developers makes them commit to it more. But I really like the idea of charging 2/3 or getting a maximum of 2/3 of our total maximum. So like setting it for 20,000 is great. So nice job, Will. Yeah, agree.
Does anybody want to make a motion? And I think we might want to go with 2 motions, one to deal with the SDCs and one to deal with the fee and lieu. Does anybody feel like making a motion? Well, anybody at all?
Make a motion that recommend.
What's that? I'm sorry.
So I'll make a recommendation a motion that we recommend the council to raise fee in lieu of immediately based on current land values.
And with a rate of, I'm looking for it quickly.
I will make a motion to start the SDCs at the average and do a hybrid plan like Rochelle had.
Okay, hang on. Hold that thought for just a second, David. Right now, Will just made a motion to accept the maximum fee in lieu rate. Is that correct?
Yeah, 89.5.
Okay. Right, we need to resolve that motion before we make another motion for the other one.
I like the second Will's motion of raising the fee and lieu to maximum amount of the, what was the amount again? I'm sorry.
16,135 for a single family dwelling unit, 11,963 for multifamily, and 12,996 for mobile home dwelling unit.
Yes.
Just to round out that motion.
I'd like to second that.
Okay. Any further discussion on that motion? Not seeing any. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, David, now's your chance. You want?
I was kind of following Rochelle's recommendation on how we go for 5 years and then we make a motion to the council for an additional 5 years. But I think we also need to figure out how to, within that 5 years, stay within the average of everybody else around us, so we don't look desirable to the bigger fish. At least not desirable either, I guess, would be the terms. Because I know I'm not alone, but I am alone when it comes to growth of the city of Sandy. But right now we're a goldfish in the shark pond, and everybody's trying to take a bite out of us. So we need to stay compatible, so we have fighting power. So, I mean, obviously start at the average of the 70, 30 or whatever it was. But, within that 5 years, we need to make sure at year 5, we are still at the average. So when we go for the next, we're not starting in the hole again.
Right, and I don't disagree with you. It's just difficult to know how that average is gonna move, because we don't know what other communities around us are necessarily doing. I think we would be pretty safe to say that we go for start at 74.35, the average now, with the top end of 20,000, as Will suggested, with inflationary steps in there also. And I think we're probably pretty safe to think that we will be at or above average at that time, but I don't know that for a fact.
And we can
Now, is that
recommendation
is
that
that
council.
I'm sorry?
20, the top end of 20,000 after the first 5 years, or is that overall?
No, that's at 5 years. At that point, we would be asking them to continue bumping us up.
I'm good with that then.
Beck had a question, or
Just, we can add to our recommendation that council revisit.
yes. Does anybody want to craft a motion around all that?
That's gonna be some fancy wording.
You want?
I recommend a motion to start at the average with a 5-year reevaluation. Council to continue the increases after the 20,000. I don't have the numbers. The 20,000 5-year cap.
Okay, here's what I'm hearing you say. Let me paraphrase your motion if I can. Your motion is that we started at the average of 7,435 in year 1.
Correct.
And increase that to 20,000 after 5 years.
Correct.
In incremental steps, including inflation.
Correct.
At which time council reevaluate and potentially move further.
Correct.
Is that what I heard you say?
You're pretty good at your job, Don.
I practice.
I'll second what David and Don just said.
I'm just not going to try to repeat that one.
Okay, so Ryan just seconded David's motion. Any further discussion? Elsie, you want to read that motion back? No, I'm just kidding. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Not seeing any. Okay, we'll throw it out there and run it the flagpole, see how it goes. That's good.
That's good.
Okay, with that, staff reports.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thanks, John.
John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Zach.
Thanks, Zach.
Thank you, John.
Staff reports.
All right. We start cost recovery work at the end of July. So the staff will be going through a week-long training, a couple hours in the morning. And then we will start our process to compile budgetary documentation and data that our consultant will use to help us analyze where we're currently at with cost recovery. And it'll help us identify direct and indirect costs. And then with that information, we'll bring it back to the Parks Board. We'll come up with service categories, which you all will be very active in helping us identify service categories and helping us make policy for cost recovery that we can eventually bring to the council for application. So we will start that process, and it's can take up to 6 to 8 months, but at the end of it, we'll have a really solid process moving forward and setting some of our fees and yeah. Yes, so.
Another simple topic.
You know, and then the RFP for the community campus closes tomorrow, so that is due by 2 o'clock. And we're enthusiastically looking forward to receiving submittals, and we'll grade them, we'll do interviews, and hopefully hire a consultant and put that contract in front of the council sometime in September. But just a reminder, there were 2 scopes of work that were wrapped into that RFP. One was for the park design development, and the other side was the aquatic and recreation concept for potentially bond revenue. So those are the 2 scopes that we'll be heading down, and we're looking forward to that and starting focus groups to help provide input and have a really robust process to get there. So yeah, and then the mountain festival was this weekend, and the park staff was work. They got lighting looking beautiful, and yeah, it was very, very impressive. Heard a lot of really good compliments, and yeah, so we're just cruising along. So yeah, it's very successful. It was fun. It was so fun. Fun.
Yeah, I'm gonna report on recreation and senior services. Kind of some of the highlights of the last month. We had our longest day parkway with our like 10 departments. That was I would say, a huge success. The numbers I heard rivaled that of before when we did it. My own personal story, my son who's 6 said it was the best day ever. His friend asked, better than Christmas and your birthday, and he said, oh yeah. So lots of smiles, lots of bike rides, good stuff happening. Noah's Quest was our next event. The Mountain Festival Kids event we put on a pet show, bike derby, kids parade. All of those went off super smoothly. It was really great to see. Rochelle touched on Mountain Festival in general. Here at the community center, we just hired a building monitor, someone who can work with us when we rent out our facility after hours. We just reviewed applications and set up interviews for a recreation coordinator. The interviews start on the 21st and 22nd. We have our deadline for gathering all of our information for our fall and winter programming, and that's the 18th. Following that, we work with the graphic designer for creating our recreation guide for our fall and winter services that we offer. And then the access to that guide will be sent out in utility bills. So there'll be like a QR code that everyone will receive in their houses, and that'll take them to a digital version of the recreation guide. I think we're also getting 750 hard copies that we'll be able to give out at different events here at the center. There's 2 possible grants in the work for senior services, one around transportation and nutrition. And I would say morale is at an all-time high here at the center. All right, and then events on the horizon. July 30th is we have the kickoff to our summer sights and sounds. That's the movies and music and lighting. That's in Pronto on July 30th. August 3rd, we've got Petty Fever, a Tom Petty tribute band. August 10th, we've got Johnny Wimbo and the Lugnuts. And then August 30th, we have Sing 2. So look forward to seeing you out in mining for those as well.
Sure we do.
With sequence.
Anything else? Before we go, I just want to say congratulations and good job to everybody. Tough discussion, good discussion. I think we came up with some good information. I look forward to council taking a look at it and hopefully moving forward in a positive way with us. So with that, meeting adjourned.
Have a good night, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Bye, have a good night.